let me begin now with management. First chapter, management. I know so little about management that I had to look it up in the dictionary. I used the American Heritage Dictionary of the English language, which has the great advantage over other dictionaries that it has the list of Indo-European roots where these words are coming from. So I looked up management, and I found to my delight it is akin to manacles, which I looked up in the dictionary, says constraining the movement of hands. So when I understood what management is all about, constraining the movement of hands, I thought I leave this particular topic to somebody else. So the next topic is self-interest. Self-interest is an extraordinarily important concept. It is really very important because it is one of the most destructive forces in our society. If you look, for instance, a most beautiful example is you watch, for instance, the airline industry. One of the multi-billion-dollar machines which by self-interest destroyed themselves almost completely. They became self-interested instead of being interested in moving people by air from plate A to plate B, which is an entirely different kind of interest than self-interest. So a further discussion on the problems of self-interest would be a fabulous topic for a specific conference which will show the universal destructive force of self-interest. I would like to end this chapter with a little parable. The parable goes about as follows. I learned it from a Chinese philosopher, Chuang-Tzu, who was living about 1,100 years before Christ. So the story he told me, which I would like to repeat to you, is as follows. The instrument maker Li produced and carved out of a harp, so extraordinarily beautiful that he decided to give it as a present to the emperor. So he cleaned it all up, put his knapsack with food, and marched to the imperial palace, which he finally reached after about 2 days of walking. Then he came to the palace walls where the guards were standing here, and he carried his harp in front of him. He walked up to that main door, and the guards saw that harp. Wow! Stepped aside. He walked through the main gate. The next was, of course, the wall with all the ministers and the honoraries of the court, and he came up with his harp in front of him. Everybody stepped aside. This was incredible. Then he came to the last wall before the emperor, where the bodyguards of the emperor were. They saw the harp, stepped aside, and he walked directly in front of the emperor. The emperor stood up and said, "Wow, this is incredible." Li gave the emperor the harp. Now, tell me, Li, how did you do that? Well, I don't know. No problem. No, come on, it can't be that easy. No, really, I mean, there's almost nothing to tell. No, you I'll tell you to tell me how you did that. Okay, Emperor, I think what I did was the following. When I thought about this harp, I thought the first thing I have to do is to forget about my interest, about my family, my kids, my house. And this took me about 2 or 3 weeks. The second thing is, I thought I should forget about all the earnings and the winnings and the thing which I could get when I sold the house. So this took me about 2 or 3 weeks. And then, Emperor, apologies, I even tried to forget you, the cross, the empire. This took me about a half a year. And when I reached that state, I walked into the woods. And what I saw was that harp. I cut it from the tree, polished the branches, strung the strings, and give it to you. That's all that is necessary to make a piece which has the beauty of heaven. This is a little parable I wanted to say in connection to self-interest. Now I'm coming to the last chapter, number 3, self-organization. Now, self-organization is a fascinating history for me, and the whole notion of self-organization popped up about 35 years ago and reached extraordinary, fast, explosive dimension of interest. There were a couple of people who started out the whole thing, and that was spreading all over the United States, jumped over to Europe, etc., etc. This was 58, 59, 60, etc., etc. There were wonderful conferences on self-organizing systems, self-organization, etc., etc. Some of the leading minds in this thing was Mr. Self-Organization. And Mr. Self-Organization had 2 names, Gordon Task. This man was so remarkable in his insight of the notion of self-organization that everybody was listening what he was saying, what he was pointing at, what he was showing, what he was demonstrating, what experiments he was doing, etc., etc. One of the essential notions which grew out of this early interest in self-organization was self-organizing. Systems are metabolic systems. They are not, in the sense, independent of whatever is outside. They need a flow of energy to allow the internal elements which constitute that system to go into interactive reaction and produce an organization which were not there before. So, the stream of energy coming in and flowing out through that system, a metabolic system, is necessary in order to allow organization within that system to take place. Let me say a word about organization. It is the point who looks at that thing. That means as beauty as some people tell me are in the eye of the beholder, so is organization. For instance, I learned from my dear friend Roberto Maturana something very interesting. He showed me when I was in Chile some microscopic slides of nervous tissue, and said, that is a wonderful preparation. You can see all this and all that. And I looked through the microscope. I saw only noise. I mean, just funny stretching, things like that. But after about half a year, working with Humberto, I began, order was emerging. And I began to understand order because I am a metabolizing system. So I could generate my order within that metabolism. Okay, after that extraordinary explosion of interest and fascination with self-organization, the whole thing appeared on the surface. And nobody became interested in self-organization, and some other terms popped up here and there and there. And after a couple of, maybe a decade or 2, the whole notion was popping up again. It was popping up from Belgium with a very interesting gentleman, Provocation, who brought the whole thing back on the table. However, he didn't call it metabolizing system. You see, in a metabolizing system, something is coming in. You go to a wonderful restaurant and eat oysters or soup or whatever, or blah, blah. Metabolize, and that's something. Now, you can address several points of that stream, intake, metabolism, output. Now, the school of Brussels, which produced a new version of that thing, paid attention only to that what came out of it, and they called it dissipative systems. Of course, you dissipate when you go to the toilet or whatever you do, you get rid of what you have. But I would not pay attention to that particular process. I would pay attention to the French food I can eat or the Italian or whatever. Now anyway, apparently it was much more politically wise to address the concept to the end instead of the beginning. So suddenly a new explosion in interest came along. Dissipative systems, self-organizing systems, etc., etc. But of course you need metabolism in order to generate now, since the new interest in self-organization is via the notion of dissipation, some people address themselves again, what are the main and elementary notions? And the elementary notion, of course, is again what we were talking, what Werner was talking about, the possibility of a closed system, working on a closed system, organizationally, or ever energetically being open so that the energy can stream through. Now, if you remember my short presentation yesterday, perhaps some of you still have this little handout. If you happen to have that handout, my recommendation is pull it out because I can make some footnotes about some of the comments I made yesterday. If you happen this little handout, just pull it out again. It's a beautiful cover, and I see not many of you may have that handout. Let me nevertheless give you a brief recapitulation of one of the points. One of the points is the following thing, which was step number 2 in my argument. If you have a system which is closed organization, there's a possibility coming from outside and changing a parameter of that system. I talked about the system is operating on a function. The classic case, people today are taking particular functions. You know, a function is relating, as you remember from the algebra classes, y to x. So y is a function. And the modern use of self-organizing systems using a very simple expression function. X minus ax squared is y. Now, if you plug it back, then the first result of a computation will be again the result of the computation, and the whole thing will go to x minus ax squared. The fascinating thing, after a while, there will be an equilibrium, a stability, etc. And stability will be, as you can easily calculate in your head, is x is equal to a. Now, a is a parameter of the system, and that can be controlled from outside. The system which we control from outside through the parameter a is not a completely self-organizing system, because you hold the a in the way you would like to have it. So it is a pseudo self-organizing system which is controlled by somebody else and not only controlled through the energy that goes. But that means if you change a little bit up or down, then fascinating things happen. And what these fascinating things that happen are at length discussed in what is called chaos theory today. And you will see all the big hullabaloo about chaos theory is that you're controlling a system which is closed. Chaos arises in the following way. If you change A level, because you have the norm of A on top of the whole thing, it may go in different equilibrium states, but at some situation it can't. If we turn away like crazy, it will never come to an equilibrium, it will do some chaotic thing. Okay, this is a state of interest today, particularly interested in what happens if I choose A in such a fashion that the system goes crazy. Now, if I were a political animal interested in self-interest, I would now take the next step and calling it beyond chaos theory. You know the standard gimmick, if you want to knock down your opponent, and he talks about biology, you say, beyond biology. So I'm not doing that because it makes absolutely no sense, but I would like to talk a little bit, if you were not giving A also the possibility to become a self-organizing element. Then you have the double closure of the system. And this is what I try to do on my page, Number three, on top of the whole thing, when I integrated two outside control systems, so that one self-organizing, pseudo-self-organizing system is merged into the other pseudo-self-organizing system, but by this merger, the pseudo is left. The two systems are now interacting and are now truly self-organizing systems. True self-organization you cannot get when you come with a control on the outside. Now, this interlacing of the two systems can be seen as one system, and this is something to do with the biology of knowing, because it's not sitting any longer in one, it's not sitting any longer in the other, it is sitting in the conjunction of the two. So therefore, what I was mentioning yesterday, wouldn't it be wonderful when this philosophical fact would be allowed to be evolving into a formalism which, to a part, may take care of, can derive certain theorems about how such systems will go into stability, will not go into stability, will go into metastable state, etc., etc., etc. Now, anyway, if you see this integration of two somewhat first look pseudo self-organizing, become a larger system, mutually interacting, determining the fate of the other by me, and he determines the fate for me, then you get a basis for the organism, you get a basis to talk about the social interaction, you get a basis to talk about sociology, where people have a mutual interest for each other, the notion of management, self-interest, self-organization in the central sense disappear. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the attention.